Chapter 16. The King's Court. The derelict space hulk Riddick chose for his base was perfect. A nameless mass of fused ships drifting in a radiation nebula. Only someone with his enhanced vision could navigate its corridors safely. Only someone with the motive's sensors could even find it. He made it a fortress. The Gretchen proved surprisingly capable engineers, using Orc know-how and scavenged Imperial tech to create serviceable defenses. Gazier transformed sections into grotesque laboratories where he could continue his research. And slowly, the crew grew. Word spread in the underworld. The shine-eyed king pays well, protects his people, and never loses. Deserters from the Imperial Navy, mutants fleeing persecution, heretics seeking refuge, even a few human criminals looking for a second chance. Riddick vetted them all personally. Loyalty through fear wasn't enough. He needed competence. The crew of the Ulterior Motive became a strange family. Humans, abhumans, Xenos, all bound by the simple fact that following the king meant survival and profit. He established rules. No unnecessary killing, no chaos worship. He'd learned enough about that insanity to want nothing to do with it. No betrayal. Break the rules, feed the void. With his resources from the von Hussar heist, Riddick began operations in earnest. Small raids on Imperial convoys, targeting those he knew from stolen data were carrying valuable cargo. Surgical strikes on Chaos cultists before they could summon demons. Selling information to those who could use it. He became a name whispered in fear and respect. The authorities noticed. Chapter 17. The Inquisition's Attention. Inquisitor Valerius of the Ordo Hereticus was methodical, thorough, and utterly without mercy. When reports crossed his desk of a mysterious pirate lord operating in the Ghoul Stars, a figure who seemed to know Imperial movements before they happened, who struck with impossible precision, who vanished without trace, he became interested. When he realized the pattern, the destroyed Orc hulk, the fallen von Hussar dynasty, and a dozen smaller incidents, he became obsessed. This isn't a pirate, he told his conclave. This is an intelligence operative of extraordinary capability. Possibly Xenos. Possibly a rogue agent from another sector. Possibly something worse. His investigation was brilliant. He tracked ships, analyzed attack patterns, interrogated survivors. He began to assemble a profile. The target was human, or passed for human, enhanced, possibly by heretical technology, operated with a small crew of Xenos and abhuman assets, used captured information to plan attacks, had spent time aboard von Hussar vessels immediately before their fall. And most tellingly, there were unconfirmed reports of the target voluntarily entering captivity, only to escape later with valuable intelligence. The contained predator doctrine, Valerius mused, reading an ancient tactical treatise. An old strategy. Enter the enemy's stronghold as a prisoner, learn its secrets, escape with prizes. Theoretical. Until now. He began to plan a trap. Act 3. The Inquisition's Gambit. Chapter 18. The Bait. The data core was perfect bait, a pre-Imperial STC fragment, recovered from a dead world. Standard template construct technology, the lost engineering designs that could build anything from tanks to terraforming equipment, worth more than entire systems. Valerius requisitioned a dictator-class cruiser, his undying wrath, typically used for high-value cargo escort. He falsified its transponder codes to make it appear as a black ship, a Psyker transport vessel, making it seem like a softer target than it truly was. In reality, full Navy crew, heavy armaments, and Sisters of Silence aboard as his trap's teeth. protected by pariah warriors whose very presence nullified warp-based powers. And he made sure news of the vulnerable cargo leaked. Not obviously. That would be suspicious. Just carefully placed rumors in the right criminal networks, suggesting a black ship carrying unusual cargo, lightly escorted due to bureaucratic oversight. The Shine-Eyed King couldn't resist. Valerius was certain of it. Chapter 19. The Trap Springs. Riddick studied the intelligence for 3 days before making his decision. "It's a trap," Zia said flatly. "Obviously. Then why are we doing this?" "Because if it's real, that data core is worth the risk. And if it's a trap, I need to know who's setting it." "Your confidence is either admirable or suicidal." "Little of both." The plan was complex. The ulterior motive would attack with the full crew, overwhelming force. But Riddick would have contingencies, always contingencies. He drilled the Gretchen on emergency protocols. If the null field activated, if his instinct suddenly went dead, they were to overload the motive's lance battery and fire everything at the black ship's power core. "But boss," Skrit protested, "that might kill boss." "Better than being captured by the Inquisition. You do it. That's an order." The attack went exactly as planned. The ulterior motive emerged from the webway and struck the escort vessels with precision. They breached the hull, fought through armsmen, secured the vault where the data core was held. Too easy. Riddick's instincts screamed a warning half a second before the null field activated. Chapter 20. The Silence. The sensation was horrifying. His predatory instincts, the constant background awareness that had kept him alive for decades, were suddenly smothered. It was like going deaf and blind simultaneously, except worse. He could still see and hear, but the animal part of his brain that processed threats, that sensed danger, that made him a predator, muted, struggling against an invisible pressure. The Sisters of Silence emerged from concealment. 6 of them, their pariah gene creating a psychic dead zone. Untouchables whose very souls were anathema to the warp. They moved with professional precision, bolters raised, their blank presence pushing against his enhanced awareness like a physical weight. And behind them, Inquisitor Valerius. "The Shine-Eyed King," Valerius said, his voice calm. "You're shorter than I expected." Riddick assessed. 6 sisters, armed and armored. Valerius, likely armed with archaeotech weapons. The null field preventing his crew from reaching him. Blast doors had sealed when it activated. He was isolated, his greatest assets, his instincts, muted. "You've been busy," Valerius continued, circling. "The Orc Hulk, the Von Hussars, a dozen other incidents. You're skilled, I'll grant you that. Possibly the most dangerous non-Astartes human I've encountered. You going to talk me to death?" "No, I'm going to offer you a choice." Valerius stopped, hands clasped behind his back. "Serve the Inquisition. Use your talents for the Imperium. You'll have resources, authority, targets worthy of your skills, or refuse and die here. Those are your only options." Riddick laughed. It was a cold, dark sound. "You think you're the first person to try to put me in a cage with a fancy name? I've been in slam facilities that made your Inquisition look soft. Then you'll die." The sisters raised their weapons. Riddick tensed, calculating angles, distances, possibilities. Without his instincts, he had to rely on pure tactical analysis. 6 targets, heavily armored, even if he could close the distance. The lights died. Chapter 21. Darkness Falls. The Gretchen had followed orders perfectly. When Riddick's biomonitor flatlined, he'd held his breath, slowed his heart through pure discipline. They'd waited the prescribed 30 seconds, then executed the emergency protocol. The ulterior motive's lance battery, overcharged and focused on a single point, punched through the black ship's void shields and cored its primary reactor. Power across the ship failed. Emergency lighting flickered on for 3 seconds, then died as secondary systems overloaded. In that instant of darkness, something changed. Riddick's instincts returned, not fully, but enough. The sisters had spread out tactically in the blackness, creating a perimeter. But pariah presence weakens with distance. At the edges of their formation, where their overlapping blank auras thinned, his predatory senses clawed back to partial functionality. Muted, struggling, but present enough. In that moment of recovered awareness, Riddick moved. The Sisters of Silence were superb warriors, trained to fight witches and psykers who relied on warp gifts. But Riddick wasn't either. He was something simpler and more primal. A predator in the dark, fighting on pure physical instinct rather than psychic power. Their greatest weapon, their blank presence, was designed to nullify something he didn't possess. His enhanced eyes saw everything in perfect clarity. The sisters, momentarily blind in the sudden darkness, relying on helmet displays that had just powered down. Valerius activating a lumen, but not fast enough. Riddick went for the nearest sister, using her own momentum against her as she turned toward his last position. Her bolter fired, but he was already moving, using her body as a shield against the others. In 3 seconds, she was down. Her neck snapped. In 5 seconds, he had her power sword. In 10 seconds, 2 more sisters were dead or dying. The remaining 3 adapted quickly, forming a defensive triangle using thermal sights. But thermal sights showed heat, and Riddick had fought in worse conditions than this. He used the environment, vaulted off walls, dropped from overhead pipes, attacked from angles they couldn't cover. The sisters were skilled, but they were trained for frontal combat against warp-touched enemies. Riddick fought like water, flowing around defenses, striking weak points, never where they expected. The 4th sister died trying to protect Valerius. The 5th died when Riddick collapsed a bulkhead support onto her. The 6th, to her credit, almost got him. Her bolter round missed by inches, and her follow-up strike with a blessed blade actually drew blood. But almost isn't survival. Chapter 22. The Inquisitor's Fall. When the emergency lights finally stabilized, Inquisitor Valerius stood alone, armed with a plasma pistol and a power rapier. Around him, his sisters lay dead. Before him, Riddick approached, bleeding from a dozen wounds but still moving. "Impressive," Valerius admitted. "But I'm not unarmed." Neither were they. The plasma pistol fired. Riddick rolled, the superheated bolt missing by inches, flash boiling the moisture in the air. He came up throwing, a shard of broken armor spinning like a blade. Valerius deflected it with his rapier, but the distraction was enough. Riddick closed the distance. The fight was brief and brutal. Valerius was skilled, augmented, and armed with masterwork weapons. But Riddick had spent months in Dark Eldar, fighting pits, surviving against opponents who saw combat as art. The power rapier thrust for his heart. Riddick twisted, took the blade through the shoulder instead of the chest, and used the moment of overextension to break Valerius's wrist. The plasma pistol clattered to the deck. Riddick stood over the fallen Inquisitor, breathing hard, blood streaming from his wounds. He could kill Valerius easily. Should kill him. Instead, he leaned close. "You thought your cage could hold me," Riddick said, his eyes glowing in the emergency lights. "You thought your trap was the only one." "What? What are you talking about? Riddick smiled. It wasn't a pleasant expression. While you were hunting me, planning this trap, focusing on this ship, my crew hit your sanctum on Scintilla, your private vault complex in the Underhive levels. Used the intelligence I stole from the von Hussars. They had files on you, Valerius. On your secrets, your hidden assets, your private archives. Everything. Valerius's face went pale. That's impossible. Check your data slate, the one in your inner pocket. There's a message waiting. With his good hand, Valerius pulled out his personal slate. The message was from his throne agents on Scintilla, time-stamped 3 hours ago. Sanctum compromised, private archives accessed, secure assets missing, 6 throne agents dead. Perpetrators used valid clearance codes, investigating source. How? Because I learned something in this galaxy, Riddick said. You people are so focused on the big threat, the obvious danger, that you miss the knife coming from the side. You put all your best people on this trap, left your personal sanctum defended by 6 agents. I had their clearance codes from your own files. Predictable. He took Valerius's data slate, his inquisitorial rosette, and his plasma pistol. I'm leaving you alive, Riddick said, because death would be a mercy. Instead, you get to explain to your Ordo how you lost everything chasing one man. How your obsession got your fortress sacked and your people killed. How you failed. He started to walk away, then paused. Oh, and Valerius. Don't come after me again. Next time, I won't be so generous. Chapter 23. Extraction. The ulterior motive was already docked, cutting through the black ship's hull. The Gretchen practically worshipped Riddick when he appeared, bloodied but alive. Boss! Boss made it, Skrit cheered. Get me to the Medici Bay, and someone secure that data core. It might actually be real. Sir was already preparing surgical equipment. You're developing a habit of barely surviving. It's getting concerning. Makes life interesting. As the ulterior motive detached and fled into the webway, Riddick watched the crippled black ship recede. Behind him, he left a humiliated Inquisitor, a ship full of dead warriors, and a clear message. The shine-eyed king could not be caged. Chapter 24. Ascension. 3 months later, the ulterior motive had vanished into the depths of the ghoul stars. Riddick's fortress hulk had grown. More crew, more resources, more reach. The data core had been real. Partially corrupted, but real. Its contents were being carefully analyzed by the tech-savvy members of his crew. The knowledge within could build weapons, ships, tools that the Imperium had forgotten. Valerius's personal files proved even more valuable. Inquisitorial intelligence, names, locations, operations, weaknesses. Riddick now had insight into the secret police of mankind's greatest empire. And the von Hussar data, the dark Eldar intelligence, the Orc technology. It all combined into something unprecedented. Riddick had built not just a pirate crew, but an intelligence network. He stood in his command center, a salvaged Imperial bridge mixed with dark Eldar technology and Orc ingenuity. Around him, his crew worked. Humans, abhumans, Xenos, all united by a simple principle: survival through superiority. Boss, Grubsit reported. We've got new contacts. Some Humies wanting to join up. They heard about the king. Screen them. Full background. Anyone with chaos taint gets spaced. Yes, boss. Sire approached, holding a data slate. I've been analyzing the intelligence patterns. The Imperium has noticed you. Really noticed you. There are wanted Picts circulating. Rumors legends. The Shine-Eyed King is becoming a myth. Good. Myths are hard to kill. They're also hard to ignore. Eventually, they'll send more than an Inquisitor. They'll send Astartes, or worse. Riddick considered this. Then we adapt. We always adapt. He looked out at the stars beyond his viewport, a galaxy of endless war, of horror and darkness, of empires built on corpses and maintained through faith and fear. He'd been thrown into this nightmare without choice, but he'd learned its rules, exploited its weaknesses, and carved out a kingdom through cunning and violence. "Send word through our networks," Riddick ordered. "We're hiring. Need tech priests, navigators, pilots, soldiers, anyone competent who can follow orders and keep their mouth shut. We're expanding operations." Expanding? Boss, we're already stretched thin. The Imperium controls 1,000,000 worlds through bureaucracy and force, but bureaucracy creates gaps, and force creates enemies. We're going to live in those gaps and recruit those enemies. We're going to become something they can't fight. A shadow organization that's everywhere and nowhere. Zaya's expression was unreadable. "You're not just building a pirate fleet. You're building a counter-Imperium. I'm building survival. Everything else is just details." As the ulterior motive prepared to depart for its next operation, Riddick allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. He'd come to this galaxy alone, hunted, with nothing. Now he had a ship, a crew, resources, intelligence, and most importantly, freedom. The Imperium would hunt him. Chaos would try to corrupt him. Xenos would seek to destroy him. Let them try. He was Riddick. He was the Shine-Eyed King. And in the grim darkness of the far future, he'd proven something the galaxy had forgotten. One free man, thinking clearly, could be more dangerous than armies. Epilogue. The legend grows. Across the ghoul stars and beyond, the legend spread. In the underhives of 1,000 worlds, criminals whispered of the king who never lost, who paid well and protected his own. In Imperial command centers, officers analyzed reports of impossible intelligence leaks and precision strikes, wondering how their enemies always knew their movements. In Dark Eldar spires, Archons told the cautionary tale of Kyle the Thrice-Pierced, who captured a beast and learned too late that some beasts bite harder in captivity. In inquisitorial conclaves, Valerius's failure became a case study in obsession and overconfidence. Some called for a full crusade against the Shine-Eyed King. Others argued he was too useful as a thorn in Chaos's side to destroy. And in the depths of space, aboard a ship that was 3 parts Dark Eldar, 2 parts Orc, and 1 part Imperial ingenuity, a man with silver eyes planned his next move. The galaxy was vast, but information traveled, and Riddick had learned the most important lesson of this nightmare future. In an empire built on fear and ignorance, the man who knows everything and fears nothing is king. The ulterior motive vanished into the webway, hunting new prey. And somewhere, in a forgotten prison, in an overlooked facility, in a cage that wasn't quite secure enough, a guard turned his back for just a moment too long. The contained predator doctrine required constant feeding, and the Shine-Eyed King was always hungry.